thank the Holocaust Museum for their programs of education, and welcome everybody here. You'll hear a story that rarely told or untold about the Jews who lived in the Arab land. At one time, nearly 1 million Jews lived in Arab land. And I'll start with my own personal life. I'll go through with my family and what happened to us and how we survived the pogrom, what happened to us, what they call the Farhud, and where we are now. So I'll begin with my first slide, and I want to concentrate on the word former. I am not a refugee. I was, at part of my life, I was a refugee, like I was a swimmer, like I was a waiter, I was a salesman. So it's only a certain period of my life I was a refugee. I don't identify myself as a refugee. I'll begin. The first slide is where I grew up in Baghdad. Our family lived in the Jewish quarter of the city of Baghdad. We were quite poor people, and you could see the family, how the left side slide, the lane, how the houses are close to each other, and it's narrow, twisted, and unpaved. Our house was attached from three sides, both sides and the back, and there was a courtyard in the center. We had the light. We lived, 13 of us, in the 3 bedrooms. 8 children, my parent, my paternal grandmother, and a cousin and her daughter lived in the house. You can see my playground, like with all the kids, was on the street, as I played marble and kicked football, played there. My life was basically half a square mile where I lived. I had my school, went to the synagogue, the baker, the shoemaker, the tailor, the candy maker, my cousin, my family all lived within a walking distance. I walked to school sometime in the winter with the mud, but this is how I didn't see a car perhaps till about 6, 7 years old. This is the photo of my parents. My mother, on the right side is the marriage contract called ketubah. My mother was married at the age of 12. She never went to school. And my father was 17 when he was married. He lost his father when he was 13 at the plague, because the sanitary was poor or unfounded. The water was tainted, and to survive, really. And my mother has 12 children, only 8 survived. I was the 7th of the 8 children. I was lucky to be born a boy, because the culture is for a woman. At best, she was a property of a man. At worst, she was his slave. But I was lucky that I was born a boy, and I was lucky to have strong genes that I survived all the diseases. My father, at the age of 13, began to work at a textile store to support his 2 brothers and his mother. His mother was also supported by the Jewish community with the food and different things. But he learned responsibility at the age of 13, started working to support his family. And then his business grew up. He became textiles importer, and he always praised the customers that bought from him. Many of them were Muslims that bought from the out of town, and he always describing as fearing God and decent and honorable. My elder brother also had Muslim friends, so I grew up not feeling any of anti-Semitism, and I had a happy childhood. I lived in a sheltered society, but I was a happy childhood. I thought Baghdad is my home and Iraq was my country, and I couldn't imagine any future but Iraq. My father always talked about the 1920s. In the 1920s, when Iraq got partial independence after World War I. World War I, as you know, won by the Allies, the British and the French, and they designed the plans of all this area was under the Ottoman Empire for nearly 3.5 centuries. And the Arab aided the Allies, the British, and to dismantle the Ottoman Empire, and the British rewarded the Hashemite family and brought Faisal. He was Emir. He became the king of Iraq. Faisal I was a very wise man, very kind, and his aim was to build Iraq. And he didn't care about what faith you are, but he wanted to have build a new country that good for everybody. So my father described that Iraq was actually in the 20s a golden era and renaissance for the Jewish community. King Faisal realized the importance of the Jewish community in Baghdad, and at that time was estimated about 1/3 to 40% of the population. They were involved in everything: banking, lawyers, construction, doctors. They were highly educated. And we had, in fact, the group from France called the Alliance Israélite built even school to teach boys and girls. So they were highly educated. So King Faisal realized the importance of the Jewish community, and he appointed the first finance minister, Sisson Hasqail III from here, who really built up the finance of Iraq, the revenue. One of his highlight of brilliance, he tied up the selling of the oil not only to the British pound, but to the gold. So when the British pound lost its value at certain times, they were still paid in gold for the oil. The British were still there, and they had some army, small army there, and it was important to them, Iraq. And King Faisal also appointed Senator Menachem Daniel. He was a Jew also. And I can see another picture here, King Faisal with the Jewish community, with the community leaders, and how they were participating in building of Iraq. Now, unfortunately, King Faisal died in 1933 at the age of 50. I mean, at that time, short span of life. And his son, Ghazi, ascended to become the king. Ghazi was 8 years old when his father became king, so he grew up in a palace. He was very spoiled and had different views about life than his father. He was interested in car racing, but worst of all, he began to reverse his father's policy and began to flirt with fascism and Nazism. And this began the life of the Jews in Iraq began to deteriorate. He translated the Hitler's book Mein Kampf to the left, to Arabic, and then the other one, the Protocol of Elder Zion, the forgery about the Jews controlling the world, and published it, and things began to deteriorate for the Jewish community in Iraq. He died in 1939 at the age of 27 in a car accident, but rumors said that perhaps the British has a hand in his death. In April 1st, 1941, there's a pro-Nazi coup that deposed the king. By the way, when he died, his son, who was 6 years old, became the king. Because he's young, his uncle became the guardian. So in April 1st, 1941, there was a pro-Nazi coup. 1941, in that time, in June, was the worst situation for the free world. At that time, Hitler controlled nearly all of Europe. His army, led by General Rommel, controlled all of North Africa, and the only America was didn't want to get involved. This is not our war. So only one man stood up to Hitler. That's Winston Churchill, and he said, "We'll fight and we will win." So the coup deposed the king, deposed the regent. The Iraqi government fled, and then it officially began the deteriorating of the Jewish community life in Iraq. Daily newspapers published articles about how the Jews are bad, they're not nationals, they're traitors. The Radio Baghdad continuously describing how the Jews are not people that we trusted. And I was 10 years old then. Although I could read the paper, every day I was sleeping, crying to sleep. I don't know what's going to happen to us. Before we always celebrated Passover. They have the whole family, the most joyous time of the year. Even when we are poor, I got all my clothes hand me down from my older brothers. But on Passover was the best time in my life. When I smelled the orange blossom, I knew Passover is coming. So my mother took me to the tailor to make me a new shirt and a short, to make me to the shoemaker, and to make me new shoes and new clothes. You know, the shirt was about 2 sizes bigger. My shoes was 2 sizes bigger. I must have looked like a clown, but I was very happy to get all the new clothes. So, but now when after the coup, our Passover was really sad. We didn't have any friends. We were worried. Some people were arrested, accused of spying for the British. Some people went to jail. And finally, this is on the left side, you see the Grand Mufti who fled Palestine in 1936, created the right and refuses the partition of Palestine at the time. The Peel Commission recommended the Palestine to partition, but he created riots and he fled Palestine and he came to Iraq. And he, with the former Prime Minister Rashid Ali al-Gailani and 4 army officers, staged the coup, and you can see the Grand Mufti with Hitler in 1941. Then the British arrived on the end of May. 2 months after, they arrived at the outskirts of Baghdad, but they didn't enter Baghdad. So the coup leaders fled with even the ambassador of Germany, Fritz Grobe, the Mufti, and they fled, and the mobs went into the Jewish quarters, broke into homes, looted the home, killed men and boys, raped women and girls and killed them, and went into all the stores, and they were coming slowly. Fortunately, we moved from the old quarter a year earlier to a better quarter near the Tigris River. So the mob was coming slowly to reach us. We could hear the noise, but they did not reach us. On the first day, that what they call the Farhud or the pogrom, my older brother, who was 6 years older than I am, took his bicycle to visit his cousins in the old city. When he arrived, the doors were broken and both houses were empty. On his way back, he went to the main street called Al-Rashid Street, and he saw the mob dragging the Jewish passengers from the minibuses. We didn't have big buses then. We had minibuses that took about 13, 15 passengers, dragging them, robbing them, and slaughtering them. So he saw the corpse on the street and the blood on the street. When he came, he was traumatized. So did we, and we put heavy furniture in front of our door. As a young kid, I carried water to the roof to boil with oil, just in case of the mob comes in to break into our home. At least we delay them till we escape. So that was, and one writer wrote a whole book about the Farhud, Edwin Black, who wrote a detailed the history and more details that I could speak here. I could talk for an hour about what happened in those details. When the British entered to Baghdad, they shot few of the writers and established back the order. This is a picture of the mass grave of the bodies that were buried. According to the Iraqi government, there's only 179 people who were murdered, but the truth is hundreds murdered and thousands were injured. At the same time, I heard stories about Muslim men stood up in front of the Jewish home to protect them. Some even took their families to their own home to protect them. Some took injured to the hospital, to the doctors to help them. So as a 10 years old, I was really confused. I heard good things, and we heard the Farhud by killing and murder, and these are, helping. So I asked my father. My father was very religious. All during this period, he was praying and reading the book of Psalm. And I asked him, what's going on? So he said, son, don't judge people by groups. There are good Muslims and bad Muslims. There are good Jews and bad Jews, good Christians and bad Christians. So that was a very important lesson in my life that I learned from my father then. After the British came in and things became normal, then we went back. There was, by the way, with the Farhud, there was no resistance and there was no fighting back. There was not even an accusation or conviction of any of those who murdered or robbed. There's a picture of our family in 1944. I'm sitting to the right, far right, and next to me is my oldest brother who was 20 years older, and he was really the mastermind of how we increase our wealth. He never finished high school, but I said, he has a PhD in common sense. He knew how to bribe the officials, the corrupted, to get textile license, import license, and suddenly we became more wealthy. We had a private home. We had this is my teenager, my playful teenager. This is my picture with my mother. But we became wealthy. We even have a private car. We had a telephone. We have a private car and a chauffeur, a gardener, and maid. So I was really spoiled. Suddenly, we had money, and I was really spoiled then. Then, another new event, after the quietness, our life turned that back again, upside down. In November 29, 1947, the United Nations decided on the partition of Palestine. As you could see, the red area is the Arab section and the blue is the Jewish. And you could see this, the south, this of the Negev, all completely desert. As Jews living with the Arab world, we prayed that the Arab will accept the partition and start a new Palestinian country. There was 22 Arab countries, and we hoped that there will be 23rd. But unfortunately, the League of Arab Nations refused, to accept, and they're calling to the failure of the plan. Oh, sorry. Yeah, and here's after the partition, demonstration erupted in Baghdad. We had all to close the school, and we were marching with them. They were screaming, "Death to the Zionists and free Palestine. There will be no Jewish state." That was not about the land. They were about no Jewish state should exist in Palestine. By the way, the word Palestine was created when the British, after World War I, they called this area Palestine. The word Palestine was 2,000 years earlier when the Roman conquered the land of Israel, and they call it Palestina Captiva. So the British revised the word Palestine. So everybody was living in that area, Palestine, was a Palestinian, whether Jew, Christian, Armenian. Everybody had the same passport, Palestinian passport. Everybody, the currency was a Palestinian pound. So we were praying that they will accept it and they start a new country. But unfortunately, they decided with jihad, and they were declaring a war against a newly state of Israel. Oh, again, sorry. I graduated in 1948. This is not my certificate, but this is a typical certificate of high school to show it to you that it's under the kingdom of Iraq. 1940 I graduated. I excelled in science, and I was hoping to come to America to become a nuclear physicist. I applied and I got accepted in 3 universities, including USC, to become a scientist. But the Iraqi government refused to give me, after months of trying. I got a visa to come to the United States, but the Iraqi government refused to give me exit visa, a permission to leave Iraq. And then, at that time, the war started. 5 Arab countries, including my country, Iraq, attacked Israel when it's born and tried to eliminate it. As I said, the war was not about unfairness of the distribution of the land. It was one idea, is to eliminate any state of Israel, even at the postage stamp. So then, after the, sorry for the hard picture photo here, then after they failed to eliminate Israel, they turned against the Iraqi Jewish community, arrest and torture, accusation of Zionism. You need 2 people to say he is a Zionist, and you can go to jail for 10 years. And people lost their jobs, no more worked in the government, they confiscation of properties, and this is culminated by the execution of a renowned Jewish merchant called Shafiq Adas, accusing him of aiding Israel by supplying them. He bought, after the British left Iraq, he bought some scrap cars or something, and he sent it to Italy. And by the way, he has a Muslim partner. He was not brought to court. So you can see to the left is the martial court on the top. Then he was led, and 4 days they had the trial. He was not allowed to bring witnesses by the lawyer, and he was executed on September of that year. My life became, and I was refused, my life became hard, and I didn't know what to do. So I decided there's no future for me in Iraq. I can't leave to study. I decided to smuggle and get out of Iraq illegally, because they wouldn't give me an exit visa to leave. So in December of 1949, at the age of 19, I took my younger brother, 13, and we took the train from Baghdad to the port city of Basra, and the organization that helped the Jews to smuggle out to Iran, organized a riverboat. I don't have the picture of the riverboat, but I asked a friend to make a sketch. The boat had no motors, and they carry in the tributary river dates, hay, or manure. So the smuggler invented a false space of wooden, about 8 by 8, 2.5 feet, and a dozen of us teenagers, including one kid was 13 years old, we got into it and covered it with hay. That journey was supposed to take about 4 or 5 hours when the river becomes half Iran and half Iraq. But the boat moves according to the tide. So sometime in the middle of the night in December, the cold December, we were in the boat, and the smuggler took us to the main river called Shatt al-Arab, the river of the Arabs. Unfortunately, after an hour, we didn't hear any more the waves hitting the boat. I went up. I was appointed as a leader for the trip. I went up. I dressed up with an Arab gown. So I spoke to the smuggler, what's going on? So he said, sorry, the tide is with us, but the wind is against us. So they went into one of the narrow tributary river, waiting for the wind to subside. And again, the wind did not, the sun rise, and we were worried what we're going to do. We can't move during the day, lest we'll be discovered. So I sent this smuggler to buy some bread. So I brought us some flat bread with dates, and there was no water, bottled water. So we drank from the tributary river, and we waited for the whole day till the next night. The next night that the tide will be with us. And thank God at the time that the wind stopped and we were able to smuggle, and we went to Iran after that. I stayed in Iran for 2 months, helping others who were smuggled there. And 2 months after, on March 2nd, 1950, I arrived to Israel. That was the happiest day in my life, because it was the first time that I tasted freedom. I walked free, I spoke free, and I slept free without fear of what's going to happen to me. But I stood in the refugee camp, stood up with a tin plate, begging for a free meal, for food that I never got used to it. They gave us herring, I never tasted, they call it slimy fish, and they gave us margarine and mashed potatoes. But I was grateful that I ate because I was hungry. In the refugee camp, I stayed maybe about a week, and I wanted to find a way, what am I going to do? So as a refugee, I had to answer 2 questions. The first, who did it to me? And the second question, where do I go from here? I realized if I say who did it to me, and I'll be making myself as a victim, full of hate, anger, and revenge. But where do I go from here? I looked up to the future. I was 19 years old boy, and I said, I have to build my own future to see where I go from here. So I stayed a week, and then somebody suggested to go to a kibbutz. So in the kibbutz, I stayed about 2 weeks. Some of you know what a kibbutz is, a farming community where nobody gets paid, and you work, you eat, you sleep there, foundation, whatever you need is covered. So after 2 weeks, I didn't want my life to be like a farmer, to stay there. I said, I want to, hopefully one day I can continue to study. So, but Israel at the time was after war, and they were worried about, threatened by the Arab neighbors to start a new war. So the most important thing for Israel is to build a strong army to defend itself after the first war of 1948. So So I moved from one job to another. I took courses in building, cutting stone and building walls. Then I joined the army, and they appointed me to be in the Navy. And this is my picture in the Navy. At that time, before your time, there was an actor called Don Amici. He has a beautiful thin mustache. So I copied him to try to have a similar, another mustache. You know, I was very handsome. And I used to joke that when I walked in Tel Aviv, I used to have an ambulance behind me because the girls used to faint to pick them up. My wife doesn't believe it. I said, I don't believe it either. While I was in the service, there was some negotiation with the Iraqi government to let the Jews of Iraq leave. There's some bribing, and so the Iraqi government issued a decree that the Jews of Iraq can leave, provided they leave with one suitcase and they lose their nationality and all their assets. So 95% of the Jewish community in Iraq, which then was about 150,000, registered to leave. And this is a picture of how they sat in the tarmac waiting for the plane. My mother and my older brother left on that journey, and of course she told us how they were robbed at the airport with the custom. They took everything valuable and to let her go. So they sat in the tarmac to get the flight to fly to Israel. And then after I finished the Navy, I dreamt again to go to Canada. I applied to go to study in America. I was refused. They gave me a visa to study. I applied to Argentina. They didn't give me a permission to come. Finally, to Montreal, hopefully that I can continue my studies, trying for the third time. When I arrived to Montreal, I was 26 years old. The brutal winter and the language, I was not fluent in the English language, and I needed money to survive. I was never wanted to ask any money, but this is a picture of my first winter in Montreal. So after I tried to work during the day, study at night, I was sleeping, tried to work the opposite. So I decided to leave the studies, and I hope my dream one day that my kids will get the higher education. Then a year after, I met my wife, my future wife, at a wedding, and we dated for 2 years, and we collected a few money to build the house. So when I needed the money, I was looking for a job. I knew what job could I get. I had no education, no special talent, no profession. What kind of a job could I get? And I knew any job that I will get will give me some food to eat, but nothing in the future of fulfilling my dream. I dreamt of traveling, was my number one hobby, and I want to be financially independent. So I decided, instead of going to take a job, to go to selling. So first I sold health insurance, then I went to selling real estate. And in real estate, selling homes, it's not easy to start real estate. So I suffered for about a year and a half, on $50 a week, and one meal a day. But after a year and a half, I was recognized as a good salesman. Then I went to became a manager of the firm. Then I had then somebody recommended we start a new real estate firm, and we started a new one. Then in 1960, 4 years after I came to Canada, I started my own real estate firm, and within 2 years, I had 30 salesmen working for me. And this is a picture of a Christmas party, the firm called Fulton Realties, and I'm in the center. My wife was pregnant with the second child, my second daughter, Lisa. After a while, I found that I'm spending more time on salesmen, so I decided to go into construction. I went to building of construction for the next 8 years. I started with a small apartment building and finally end up building a high-rise building of 21-story, 241 unit. Again, we don't know what happened to us. Unpredictable things could happen. At that time in 76, the province of Quebec, which is equivalent to a state, had elected a separatist government, and they wanted to separate Quebec from Canada. And this building was built in an English section, so many English people left, and we had the building empty, standing empty, so we lost that building. And after that, I've learned, to start something else. Back to the history of the Jews in Arab land. Here it shows a picture of how nearly 1 million Jews lived in the Arab land in the Middle East and North Africa. In Iraq, 150, in Egypt, 75, Algiers, about 140, and Morocco, 265. That some of us were there for many, many generations. And here a slide shows 1948, where the Jews lived in Arab land in North Africa and Iran, and in 2016, how many were left. In all Arab, after the establishment of the State of Israel and the Arab losing 1956 war, 1967 war, and then the persecution of the remaining Jews in the Arab land, so all of them fled. They became refugees. Every one of them has to learn a second language because no one went back to another Arab land. They have to move to learn to live in a new culture, new language, but all looked ahead to try building their own future. About 600 of them went to Israel to live. At that time, no country or United Nations gave any support to absorb the new immigration of the Jews that came to Israel. So Israel struggled to build a new country and a new economy. By the way, I never discussed with my family about the pain and the trauma that I faced in Iraq for 5 decades. Then I decided to take memoir classes in Santa Monica College, and I wrote about our horrific trip of smuggling. And when I read it in the class, I cried right through from every word. And I felt that released me because I didn't talk. Now I had bittersweet tears. The one that I felt the sense of freedom, the one when I left Iraq. And then in 2020, I finally wrote my memoir, Beyond the Rivers of Babylon, published on Amazon. In it, the most important lessons in life that I could share with you. I've learned how a broken dream that I faced to build a new one. As I said, I tried 3 times to go to college. My dream to be a scientist had broken. So I said, my children will be educated. So I have 3 children. I have 2 PhDs and 1 medical doctor, MD. Then I learned how to face failures, to turn failure and difficulties into success. When I lost the building, I immediately borrowed money and I went into another building, a building that I converted apartment to condominium, and I recovered my money. Then I learned how to face disappointment. Like when I stood in the refugee camp begging for a food, I said, I'll never, never do that again. So not only I learned to be financially independent, but all my 3 kids are financially independent too. At the same time, I began translating my book to Arabic to tell the story about the Jews in Arab land. And this just a month ago, the publisher in Iraq started to print these books. And I wrote many articles. I wrote one article on 2021 commemorating the sad event, 80th anniversary of the Farhud, of the sad event that happened to us in Iraq. And I sent it to 3 major newspapers, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Washington Post. And only newspaper that published was in the Wall Street Journal, published on May 29th, 2021, and the heading was, "When the Mobs Came After the Jews of Baghdad." And I continue to write through the COVID, to talk to different university on Zoom. I spoke to Vanderbilt University, and after COVID I was invited to go to University of New Hampshire. In person, I flew to New Hampshire. I spoke about our stories to UCLA, USC, Santa Monica College, and I feel privileged that I can talk and share an unknown and untold story. And this is the story of my life and my family, and I'm grateful for each one and every one of you that came here to listen, and I hope that you have heard something that will perhaps improve your life, that add more joy to your life. And I thank you again, and I'm open for question and answer.
What happened to your mom after you left?
Yes, my mom came with my older brother on this migration. And I saw the picture where they stood up in line at the tarmac and they came to Israel. But 95% of the Jews of Iraq left on that. About 8,000 people stayed. And they thought that they have connection with Iraqi government. They are Iraqis. They don't want to go. They stayed there. And what happened to them is very tragic also. In 1958, there was a coup d'etat in Iraq. They killed the king. They killed the prime minister. They killed the regent. And the new era started. In 1963, part of the coup killed all other people and took over. And they called the Ba'ath Party. And they began to persecute the Jews. And after 1967, the Jewish life, all these people became miserable. There were properties confiscated, their telephone line was cut, and all of them, they have to run away either legally or illegally, leaving behind their life. And in January 1969, they picked up Jews from the street, they tortured, and they accused them of being pro-Israel, Zionist, and they hanged them in public square on January of 1969. 9 of them, they picked up 11. One was they killed to frighten the other people to sign. One person refused after all the beating to sign. He was acquitted. The other 9 was publicly hanged, and the Iraqi government declared a national holiday. There were some 500,000 people. School was closed, office closed, and they were celebrating it. So every one of them finally left. Maybe there are 2 or 3 people, older people left in Iraq now. Yes, sir.
Did you ever feel pressure when you were a teenager to adopt a more Arab persona or personality to avoid any kind of persecution you felt as being Jewish in Iraq?
Yes. We all, as I said, spoke Arabic. This is our mother tongue. We had Muslim friends. We traded with them. We went with them. So we spoke the language. By the way, the Jews has a special dialect called Judeo-Arabic, which is different than the Muslim ones. But we all adopted and talked with them. We stayed. The main thing, what happened is the leaders, the governments, the leaders that decide. you know. And as you can see, you know, as I said here, the wind the wind of evil is strong, but I do believe that the tree of peace is stronger and solid and will deepen to the ground. So we hope that the Muslim, the Arab, the biggest enemy is their own people. Anybody that disagree with them, they kill. You could see what happened in Syria, in Assad. Assad in Syria murdered over 340,000 of his own people. He used gas 3 times, twice under the Obama administration, and Obama at that time put a red line: if he does it again, we'll attack him. But then the 3rd time was under Trump. So as soon as he used gas to kill his people, Trump bombed him. So this is what we hope, and that we hope that the people will stand up against these evil regimes. And when I saw the massacre of October 7, it really ignited the trauma that I faced when I was a child. And I wrote a number of articles, one of them published in Jerusalem Post, about my fear and how, yeah. So as much as we adopted we speak the language, it was still discrimination against our faith as a minority. Yeah. Yes, sir.
How come you didn't want to stay in Israel when you finally got there?
Yes. I stayed in Israel, and I was dreaming to go to college. I wanted to go to college. And I know Israel is continuously at war. It's continuously preparing. There was no war. I didn't see wars when I was there. I came in after the War of Independence, 1948, and I left just before the Sinai War in 1956. So I said, I'm going to go to study. If I cannot, you know, I'm going to go somewhere that I know that I'm going to go to study. So when I went to Canada and I tried it, and I met my wife, so I stayed there. But I have my family, and I fulfilled my dream of travel. I traveled over 100 countries, and I love the travel. So one of my favorite places to visit Israel, because you see the young, the modern, and the old history there, and how democracy survived. If ever anybody visited Israel, you see how the Arab, they are living as equal. They have Arab in the medical school. They have even a judge in the high Supreme Court is an Arab. Before this government, the Arab was part of the government. They live the freest. They serve in the Israeli Defense Forces, and the best life they live in the Arab. But as I said, the wind of hate is strong that comes from time. I hope it will die soon and we'll have more peace. Yes, sir.
How do you think you were able to maintain your optimism in spite of all the challenges?
Thank you. Thank you. That's a very good question. I have no choice, number one. And I said to answer the question, who did it to me? If I stayed, I would be a victim. But I am a young man, and looked for the future. And I learned to, when events that happen beyond our control, life is not easy. Life is generally hard. And many things happen to us beyond our control. It's how to learn to adjust it. And when I started my family and my kids, this gave me the optimism how I want to pass my values to my kids, to generation, to get educated. My first granddaughter just graduated doctor in psychology. She's 30 years old, you know. So it gives me optimism to see the good people. When I see good behavior, good people, I feel like touched, you know, because there are so many good people in every nationality, in every religion. And I learned to judge people on their own activities. Does this answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you so much. Yes. Yes.
Did you yeah, so you said that you never spoke to your family about what you went through until you got into writing your memoir. Would you say that speaking about it and being open has brought you closer to your family?
It did. Not only to my family, it brought me closer to myself too. I felt more free, like I do right now. I feel very comfortable and very happy that some people learn our story, you know. So I'm invited in different places and different. In June, I'll have invited to have a book signing at the Barnes and Nobles, and it gives me a great honor and pleasure to share the story. Maybe someone will, as I said, if you pick up one thing that improved your life, I feel good with myself. Yeah. Yes.
Amidst the war and the cultural climate right now, how do you stay optimistic now, currently?
Again, I have no other choice. I can see, and I see some good people. I know now with the new era that we are facing with Hamas, and you see, they don't care for their own people. The more people in every war, there was called their collateral damage. During World War II, there were more German died, innocent people died from bombing than the British. And in the World War II, there were the atom bomb that many people were not fighting, but they knew how to end up. The war ended up unconditionally. World War I ended up with an agreement that started the World War II. But World War II, Germany surrendered unconditionally and Japan surrendered unconditionally. But unfortunately, there's always collateral damage. People get damaged. And unfortunately, the Arab leaders do not care for their own people. The more people that died in these wars, the happier they are, because they want to display Israel is a bad country. They had opportunity so many times to start their own country. In 2000, 2012, they offered to 95%, but they didn't want. Their aim is one thing, hating the Jews. Unfortunately, yeah. I hope that the good people will rise again for their own sake, So we have to face the reality and keep optimistic. Yes. Yes, sir.
I got a question. What's maybe the greatest lesson you learned over your life?
Greatest lesson is how to define myself and the circumstances. When I failed, I did not describe myself as a failure. Rather, I failed in what I did. And what lesson do I learn from that failure? Every difficulties in life we face, it's an opportunity to develop, to do the bigger things. So it depends how we define our lives, define ourselves. Look to learn from others. And the saying, the Chinese, is that the best lesson you learn is under the feet of an old man. So if I can share my stories, I'm feeling happy. I don't know if I'm a wise man, but I've learned a lot of experience in my life, and trying to do. Yes. You have a question? Yes, sir.
How are you able to be so damn healthy and mentally too? You're sharp as a tack.
I'm only 93, so look. I guess
do you exercise?
I do exercise every day. I have a masseuse come to my house once a week. I have a trainer comes twice a week to my house. That's reading my body. Keep my mind. I'm up to date with the computers. I'm not a master in it, but I write and I challenge myself. I still continue the memoir classes after 17 years. Even now I attend the class. and we had a very excellent instructor give us prompt, and I write my article, get a critique, and then the third part of my life, body, mind, and soul. I every morning I wake up, I give thanks to God, I pray for the good health, I pray for my children, and I stand with my wife every day, and I wrote what I call inspiration. I said, this is the day the Lord has created to rejoice and be happy at it. Day by day and in every way, I feel better and better and better. I feel fine, I feel wonderful, and I feel terrific. Then we both sing, oh, what a beautiful, can sing all of us. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I have this wonderful feeling. I said, something is going my way. And I laugh to laugh. And so this, my family keeps me the joy. And whatever God gives me, I'm happy to share. Thank you so much, every one of you.